G'day guys and welcome back to the Boundary Riders Podcast. Today we're up to episode 23 and just finished round 21, really shaping up the season now. Only 3 more rounds to go after this one. We saw Hawthorn probably get one of the biggest upsets of the season with a massive win over Collingwood. Carlton beat St Kilda to almost secure their spot in the 8. And we've got a plumber here at the moment, so that is the noise in the background. We're actually joined with our co-host that's barely here anymore, Jack. But of course we did have round 21 come up and it's going to be really hard to see who makes the finals from here.
Yeah, I can't. It's such a logjam. It's really hard to see who's actually going to take the spot and want the finals.
Well, at the moment, we have 5th is Carlton, 6th is the Bulldogs, I believe. Yeah. Or the Bulldogs. Then we have the Saints in 7th, Giants in 8th, Geelong 9th, Sydney 10th, Adelaide 11th.
Yeah, and that's probably it.
That's probably it now. Who do you think makes the 8? What do you think the 8 shapes up to be now?
I think the Saints and the Dogs miss, and I think the Crows make it, and I think it's the Cats, isn't it? Yeah, the Crows and the Cats make it. From what it is now.
Do you think Swans just miss out? Do you think they're the unlucky one?
The Swans, I think, are going to, with their run. If the game against the Crows was in Sydney, I'd be tipping the Swans, but I don't think they're going to win it in Adelaide. So I think that's the game that shapes it. I think that's the game that shapes it.
Yeah, but also the Bulldogs just have to win one more game, I think, and 2 more games, and they make it.
Yeah.
But they do have a bit of a weird run home for them.
Yeah.
Obviously, we'll get into that later today as well. But what I wanted to start off with is actually some breaking news here, which is round 24 has been announced. The full fixture. We obviously know the games for quite a while, but the games have been revealed. So on Friday night at 7:20 for Adelaide, 7:50 for Melbourne. Essendon versus Collingwood, massive game, obviously on Channel 7. On Saturday afternoon, we have North Melbourne versus the Gold Coast Suns at Blunston Arena. Hawthorn versus Fremantle at the MCG this Saturday afternoon. Saturday twilight is Brisbane versus St Kilda at the Gabba, massive game. Saturday night we have Geelong versus the Western Bulldogs down GMHBA Stadium, and West Coast versus the Crows at Optus Stadium. And on Sunday we have some massive games as well. Port Adelaide versus Richmond is the early game. Sydney versus Melbourne is the mid game, and Carlton versus the Giants is the final game of the round. And at this stage, I think that that Carlton GWS game is really going to decide who makes the 8 from here.
Yeah.
And also the Swans Melbourne game is massive as well, because Melbourne, I think at that stage will be trying to push for top 2, so it's not like it's going to be a gimme game for the Swans, as Melbourne don't really care about it. Also, we've got the Saints against Brisbane. That's a massive game for them as well, because St Kilda have to win at least 2 more, probably a game and a half, 2 more games to make it from here, so that may be one they have to pull. And I think especially also Saturday night, Geelong versus Bulldogs, that may also be a decider as well. So a couple of massive games coming into round 24. But now I think we'll move into the review of round 21, which I actually did by myself because we just had to get it out on Sunday. But here it is now, guys. So guys, until we get to the review of round 21, massive round that we had. And we started off with the Bulldogs versus the Tigers. And I think the Bulldogs just are a huge response team. We've seen that throughout a lot of their season. They will respond after getting a lot of backlash throughout the week that was. And they did get a lot of backlash last week. But they did respond very nicely, and led by Marcus Bontempelli. He was massive. One of the best games from the season. That's a big thing to say, because he's had a lot of big games this season, but he led from the front for the Bulldogs and got them over the line, in my opinion. They did win this game by 55 points, so it's a pretty big win for them. It does give them a little bit of percentage, which knocks over the Saints and a few others around that category, and the Giants as well, who did lose. But that's actually a good win for the Bulldogs, and they've got a pretty decent run home. Not the best, not the worst. They do have, let me quickly just get this up. Yeah, Hawthorn next week, West Coast, and Geelong. Now, Hawthorn is down in Tassie, so that's going to be a bit of a difficult game for them. West Coast at home, they'll win pretty easily. And then they've got Geelong at the end of the season down in Cardinia Park. So that's going to be a hard game for them. But the Bulldogs have got close down there a few times. We'll get to the votes now. 3 votes went to Marcus Bontempelli. Like I said, he was massive. Best player on the ground by a long way. Liberatore got the 2 votes, and then Ugle Hagen got the 1 vote. He started their team off very nicely in the first quarter with the 4 goals, and then was pretty good throughout the rest of the game. Kicked the goal late in the last quarter as well. After that, we get to nearly one of the biggest massive upsets of the season. Bombers versus West Coast. If it wasn't for Kyle Langford, they lose this game. Bombers went up by 1 point. boy, were they lucky to get away with this one. They had a 30-point lead, I think, through the third quarter, and they nearly gave up a win against the West Coast Eagles. And I think if it was against anyone else, even North Melbourne, they'd lose this game, the Bombers. They just don't really put a lot of teams away. We've seen that a few times this season, and a lot of times haven't been able to get over the line against teams as well. And from a really good start to the season, they've kind of petered off a little bit. I don't think they were going to be really expected to make finals, but teams like halfway through the season, it was St Kilda and Essendon who were like the really outliers going into, you know, the second half of the season, who were sitting in the top 8, looking pretty comfortable. And both of them have really fallen off at the end of this season. And I don't know about St Kilda, they're still in the 8, but they're clinging on for dear life. The Bombers won't make it now. They have completely shot themselves in the foot. I guess that's kind of fair for a young side. It is still pretty disappointing for the fans of the Bombers, though, to miss the finals after having such a promising start. The shining light from this game, though, is Kyle Langford. He's kicked 45 goals for the season. I think I've said this a few times. He is one of the most underrated players in the AFL. One player who I would really love to see in my team if I was starting up, because he's such a good forward. He's a pretty good midfielder, and he's really good down in defence as well. He's an all-round player. It's interesting because he was trained as a midfielder, I think, in pre-season, and they've just chucked him up forward, and he's on track for 50 goals here. So he's been a real shining light for the Bombers, and he's definitely something they can build off of in the next few years as they try to build towards a really good competitive side. So the 3-2-1 vote to give 3 votes to Kyle Langford, 2 votes to Tim Kelly, and the 1 vote to Zach Merritt. I mean, you got to give West Coast a little bit of credit. They were quite good in this game, but I mean, they lose again. And look, to be honest, I'm a little bit surprised that West Coast actually showed up, to be fair. I thought that last week they would have been pretty happy with the performance against North Melbourne, you know, be happy to take the number 1 pick at the end of the season, but maybe it looks like that they would like to win a few more games and aren't looking for the number 1 pick at this stage. So if I'm North Melbourne, I'm a bit scared right now because West Coast have actually performed a lot better in the past few weeks, and if they knock them out of the, you know, if they knock North Melbourne out of the 17th spot, and after a woeful season, one of the worst performing teams in 20, 30 plus years, West Coast, to not finish bottom, that's embarrassing for North Melbourne by a huge margin. And we'll talk about them in a little bit as well. But after that, we get to the Crows versus the Gold Coast. The Crows basically won this one in the first quarter. First quarter and a half. Gold Coast did start to fight back in the end and did make it a little bit interesting, but the Crows just burst away in the end. Good to see them pushing for finals now, and they're definitely joining that logjam in that fifth to sixth position, all the way down to about 12th now. So they're definitely giving themselves a ripe old crack. They don't have the hardest run home. They've got Brisbane next week in Brisbane, so that's a pretty tough one. Then they've got the Swans at home. That is a massive game. I think whoever loses that is eliminated from the finals race. And they've got West Coast in the final round away from home. So I could bank 2 wins there, and at the moment, with them being 10 wins in the AFL, you need 12 and a half wins, maybe 13 to get there. If they can get 2 wins, they give themselves a chance with their really good percentage. So, good win from them. They needed it. Gold Coast fought hard, but they couldn't get it done in the end, and that's probably their finals race done and dusted. Interesting how if Damien Hardwick does get the job, if he can get him there next year, I think he's got the list ripe and ready to go. If they can bring in a couple of players with Damien Hardwick's appointment, that could definitely bring in some new virality to the team as well. We'll get to the votes now. 3 votes to Darcy Fogarty, was massive up forward. He kicked 3 goals, but was also massive around the ground. 2 votes to Mitch Hinge, who has been brilliant off halfback, one of the best, one of the most improved players at the Crows this year. And 1 vote to Matt Crouch. Interesting that this guy has not been in the team most of the year, and suddenly now he's into the team, and he's doing a pretty good job. Next game, we move to one of the bigger upset, probably the biggest upset of the weekend by far, one of the biggest upsets of the season. Hawthorn have beaten Collingwood. You look at this one on paper, on the ladder, you would just think this is Collingwood's game every single day of the week, especially wanting to respond after that Carlton performance last week. But Hawthorn came out and really showed a good way how to beat Collingwood, and a lot of the top 4 sides at the moment aren't performing that well. Melbourne did get over the line against North Melbourne over the weekend. Brisbane only just clutched up against the Dockers, and Port Adelaide have lost 4 in a row now. So all the top 4 teams are really underperforming. This may be a year where a team outside of the top 4 can actually go all the way if they can hit their form in the right time, because there's a lot of teams out just inside the 8 to like Carlton, Sydney, the Crows even as well. If those guys can make the finals, I think they can give it a real shake because these teams are coming in with some form, and a lot of the top 4 teams are really dropping off at the moment. So at this stage, it's really an open race, and Collingwood really need to start lifting here because this is a pretty poor performance. They lose again, and Hawthorn, I know a lot of people have said that they've had to eat their words, and that's including me, but they're building a good team here. They really had to cut very deep. I still don't know if that was the right decision, but at this stage, it seems like it's going in the right direction for the Hawks. The votes now, we get to the 3 votes, which is James Sicily. He was massive. I think that's a pretty obvious one to get the 3 votes. 2 votes to Dylan Moore, not Darcy Moore, Dylan Moore. He was massive, kicked 2 goals as well. And then Will Day got the 1 vote for me. He was very good as well, playing off that midfield a little bit, getting all around the ground, Will Day. He's been very good this season as well. And if they did keep people like Tom Mitchell and Jay Gromira and things like that, he probably doesn't get that spot in the midfield. So good to see Will Day performing quite well as well. And it's also interesting because Tom Mitchell got subbed out as well. He was injured, but he's not really hitting the 22 in Collingwood at the moment. So maybe it was the right decision by Sam Mitchell. I still aren't 100%, but at the moment he's proven everybody wrong, and you've got to give him credit for that. After that, we get to Saturday night, Geelong versus Port Adelaide. Geelong just held on. It looked like at times that Port Adelaide could steal this one. And with the injuries that they've got, I think they performed very well, above all expectations. They had no recognised ruckman, really. I mean, Vicentini actually did really well in there. I think he had the highest centre clearances and clearances for the match. So very good from him. But of course, he's only a third gamer. He'll grow into his career, I'm sure. But he definitely looks like he's ready for the level. Yeah, I think he's not exactly a AFL player just of yet. But of course, he had to come in today and give Port Adelaide something in there. And he was very good, along with Zach Butters, Jason Horne-Francis, and Rosie as well. But Geelong, down in Geelong, is always going to be a hard matchup for Port Adelaide, and they weren't able to get it done. And Geelong do keep their finals hopes alive. At the moment, though, the Cats have a pretty tough run home. They have the Pies this week, then they have the Cats. They have the Pies this week, then they have the Saints, and then they have the Bulldogs down in GMHBA Stadium. St Kilda looked okay today against Carlton, I'll give them that, but you think they win at least 2 of those, but at this stage, they may have to win all 3. I don't know if they will. I think that they'll be fine if they can win 2 of those 3 games, but at the moment, it's getting real close in that middle region right now, and I think basically St Kilda and the Bulldogs are the 2 vulnerable teams, along with the Giants. But yeah, the Cats did well. They needed this win. They got it. Led by Brian Myers, who is just the assist king. I know he hasn't got a lot of goals this year, but I think it's pretty hard to go past him as an All-Australian forward. He's got so many goal assists. He's a great user of the football. And he was just massive in this game as well. So he did get the 3 votes. The 2 votes went to Zach Butters and the 1 vote to Ollie Henry, who was massive in this game. And really lifted with the loss of Tom Hawkins over his injury. And he may come back in a couple of weeks. I'm not too sure about that. It's going to be tough for him to make it back, Tom Hawkins. But yeah, that was good for the Cats to get over the line against Port Adelaide. And Port Adelaide have just hit a real wall. I know they've got a lot of injuries and they just keep on stacking up. But at the moment, they are 10 points from 5th spot, which is Carlton. And Carlton's run home is not easy. They've got Melbourne, Gold Coast, and the Giants. But they want to be a little bit careful. I don't think Carlton will be able to knock them out of the top 4. But they've got to be careful because if they don't hit form towards the end of the season, they've got a pretty tough run home, Port Adelaide, as well. They've got the Giants next week. Then they've got the Dockers in Perth and Richmond. I mean, I could really only see... I could see them winning all 3 of them. But I could also see them losing all 3 of them. So if they hit the finals, I don't think a team who's hit finals has been in the top 4 and lost 7 in a row. I don't think Port will do that. I think they will bounce back in the next couple of weeks. But they've got to be very careful at this stage, especially going into the final series. After that, we get to the Battle of the Bridge for the Sydney Derby. Massive game. This was a great game of footy to watch. The Giants started off okay. Sydney just bounced back. Good second quarter from them. And they just were able to hold the Giants at bay for the rest of the game. The Swans really give themselves a chance now of making the 8. They're currently 10th. Have an awkward run home. They have the Gold Coast next week, which have been their bogey side for a while. The Crows at Adelaide Oval and Melbourne to finish off the season at home. Massive 3 games. I don't know if they can win all 3 of them. They may have to, though, if they want to make the finals. And if they do, they'd be on 7 on the trot, and they could definitely get the top 8 a shake. but it's going to be massive, and they did get a win against the informed Giants. So they're definitely hitting some form late in the season, and led by young gun Errol Goulden. He has been massive this season, Errol Goulden. If he doesn't make the All-Australian team, I think it's just bullshit. As a wingman right now, him, Lockie Hunter, Ed Langdon, I think, and Josh Dacos, I think he's leading all of them. I think if he's playing in Collingwood right now, he has been the most talked about player in the competition, maybe with Nick Dacos. He has been massive this season for the Swans. Amazing ball user, always gets his touches, always around the ball, tough over it, a good finisher. I don't think there's anything you can say about him that's weakness in his game, and he's definitely getting a lot of votes towards the end of the season as well, especially in the Riders medal, which is of course way more important than the Brownlow medal. He's getting a lot of votes late in the season, so he obviously got the 3 votes. Tom Green got the 2 votes, and the 1 vote went to Hayden McLean, was massive up forward with the 4 goals. Went into the ruck as well as second ruck, and he actually performed quite well in there as well as he has for quite a while now. But I think with obviously the Buddy Franklin retirement, he did actually do quite well up forward, but obviously Tom Hickey had to come back so he could give a little bit more support to Logan McDonald and Joel Amati. So good play from Sydney. I think the 3 key forwards can work for them, and I think that they're going to be a tough team to beat in the next couple of weeks. After that, we get down to Tassie, North Melbourne versus Melbourne. First game back for Alistair Clarkson. They started off very, very well. North Melbourne kicking 5 goals to, I think, 1 in the first quarter. But then they only kicked 5 more goals the rest of the game, and Melbourne bounced back pretty well. Were able to just pull them back, and a really good performance by Melbourne in the end. Were able to get 100 points yet again. It looks like they've finally found the forward structure. If it wasn't for the fact that Harrison Petty went down in the third quarter with an injury, really unfortunate for him. They finally look like to have found the combination that they needed up forward, but unfortunately he's gone down. So they were able to beat North Melbourne, but I don't know how they're going to do it the next few weeks. It's going to be interesting who they'll put up there now and see who they can finally find a score from. But North Melbourne, I mean, look, they're not as bad as West Coast, but I mean, they've lost to West Coast. They nearly lost their 17th spot down to 18th again. We have not seen a team finish bottom 4, I think, this many consecutive years in a row for a very long time. It's not looking good, and look, we'll see how they go next season with a pre-season and a whole season probably from Alistair Clarkson, they would hope, but there's not much to build off of at the moment, and they're not looking good at all. This season's going to be a very tough run home for them, the next 3 weeks, trying to just get to the end of the season. I think they'd be happy to call the season now for them. They've got the Bombers, the Tigers, and the Gold Coast to end the season. So look, how the Bombers played last week, I mean, they give a chance, but, I mean, are they playing good enough? I don't know. We'll see how they go. The votes now, though, we get to Christian Petrarca with the 3 votes. Jack Zeeble with the 2. He was brilliant. And I think he just has to play in this team next year. Hopefully he goes on for North fans, but he was just very good. And the 1 vote went to Lockie Hunter. After that, we get to one of the biggest games of the round going in, which was St Kilda versus Carlton. Whoever won this game basically secured their spot in the 8. And the team who lost it was just going to be right back in the pack. And Carlton, after being down for a lot of this game, in the last quarter we just able to pull in front and kept St Kilda goalless in the last quarter, which was massive from them. And now I think Carlton are pretty well secured in that top 8 spot. They have at the moment, I think it's 11 wins, is it? Let me just quickly check. They have 11.5 wins, obviously with that draw in round 1. You need 12.5, 13 to make the 8. Their next 3 games are pretty tough. Like I said, Melbourne, Gold Coast, GWS. I think they'll be able to get the Gold Coast done. They get that one away from home, though. They've got Melbourne next week, and that will be a massive game for them. They've got 7 wins on the trot. You give them a real chance in this game. And then the Giants in round 23 is going to be massive as well. Obviously, the Giants look like at this stage that will be their final. They may have to win that game to get there. So, yeah, but they were brilliant in this game. Carlton had to do it a bit differently. They weren't up for a lot of the game. They had to pull in front late. But they did it brilliantly. I watched this game live on stream, and Carlton are going to be a hard team to beat, especially if they get into how they go in September, because I think they make it now. I don't think they miss it. And what a massive turnaround this team's had. Michael Voss to change this team in the space of, mid-season, which is very hard to do. He's done brilliantly. And Carlton are finals bound now, and I think are going to be very hard to beat if when they make it. We get to the votes now. Newman got the 3 votes in this game. Mason Wood got the 2 votes and the 1 vote to Sam Doherty. Just one quick mention of St Kilda before we move on to the last game. They're in free fall now. Their next 3 games are Richmond, Geelong, and Brisbane. Richmond, massive game. Geelong at home, so at Marvel Stadium, and then Brisbane at the Gabba to finish the season. At this stage, I don't know if they beat Richmond. They don't beat Geelong, and Brisbane at the Gabba, they're not going to win that. So, St Kilda did hold up very well in defence for 3.5 quarters. Well, 3.5 quarters. They kept Charlie Curnow goalless until the last quarter, but they have no attacking structure. They don't get enough goals from their forwards. Their midfielders don't get goals either. It's just really poor in the end, really, and I don't see much working for them going forward if they don't find some better small forwards. They don't get some goal-kicking midfielders, and yeah, that's really a downfall for St Kilda after having a massive start to the season and now really tumbling away at the seams. And it's going to be really interesting if St Kilda can hold on to that spot, but at this stage I think they fall out of the 8 by next week. And finally, we get to a massive thriller down in Perth. Fremantle versus the Brisbane Lions. Brisbane just held on late to secure a win against the Dockers, and I did say in the Instagram post that they made the top 2. They missed out by a percentage point because they didn't win by enough against Fremantle, and Melbourne now are in second. But they do keep their their top 2 spot alive. Their next 3 games are a bit tough. They've got the Crows next week at home, which they should be able to win. Collingwood in Melbourne, and then St Kilda at home. They should be able to win 2 of them, but I don't know if they can beat Collingwood in Melbourne. That's going to be a very tough game for them. But if they do want their top 2 spots to stay alive, they need to win this game. And if they can get a home final, they're going to be very hard to beat and could very well be grand finalists this year by just getting a home final because they're nearly impossible to beat over there. Fremantle were brave here, and they did keep their mathematical hopes alive if they won this game. I don't think it would have mattered. But they are playing some okay footy in the past few weeks. We saw them beat Geelong down in Geelong, which they've had an okay record down there. But they do have something to build off of. I think they need a little bit more midfield depth. They need to find a key forward, but they've been looking for that for 20 years. Sorry, since Pavlich left. But they've been looking for that forward combination for 20, 30 years, since basically their induction into the AFL. So they need to find something. But their recruit, who was obviously very questioned at the start of the year, was Luke Jackson. He was massive in this game. It shows that he needs to be a ruckman. I will be interested to see what happens in the off-season with Sean Darcy, because this guy needs to be a ruckman for the club. He is massive. He's able to get the ball on the ground. He's basically he's like basically a 4th midfielder in there. He was massive in this game and got the 3 votes for me. Kicked a goal, was massive around the ground, and I just don't know how they keep them both in this side, Sean Darcy and Luke Jackson. We saw Melbourne obviously try to bring the Gawn and Grundy 2 ruckman combo. It obviously didn't work. We are obviously a lot of talks now that Grundy's going to leave. I'd be very interested to see if Sean Darcy stays at the club next year. I think that they can make some real cash from Sean Darcy leaving and then potentially throwing that at a forward, which they desperately need. So we'll be interested to see. Good game from him. He got the 3 votes. 2 votes to Lachie Neale, was massive in the middle. Got him over the line, in my opinion. And the 1 vote went to Caleb Sarong. But yeah, guys, that is the review of round 21 and a massive round coming up next week. So now we'll move into the tips for round 22. First game, massive game, Collingwood versus Geelong at the MCG. Collingwood have had a bit of a slump in the last few weeks, obviously losing against Carlton and then a really big upset against Hawthorn. Geelong coming off a good win against Port Adelaide, but maybe it could have been a little bit more, and a loss against Fremantle. So both teams aren't coming in with the best of form. I just think that Collingwood, with their class, I don't think they lose 3 in a row, and I think that they bounce back here, surely, against Geelong.
No, I don't think they do. I think the Cats win.
You think the Cats win?
Yeah, I think this Dacos and Nathan Murphy injuries really going to hurt the structure of the Collingwood, and I think it's going to be sort of like the Brisbane when they lost Ashcroft. It's going to be their fun. They're going to just try to find a. I don't think they're going to
midfielder.
Yeah, they're just going to have to try and find a way, and I just don't think they're going to be able to do it straight off the bat.
Yeah, I think that Billy Frampton obviously comes back for the Pies. I think that's a pretty obvious one.
Yeah,
he takes that spot in the back 50. I just think that the Cats don't have enough. They're not playing well enough. I don't think that. I think that they need to win at least 2 of their last 3 games, but I don't know if they're playing well enough to beat Collingwood, and I think Collingwood have to bounce back after their 2 poor performances in the past 2 weeks. That's why I've picked them. After that, we went to Saturday afternoon. It's North Melbourne versus the Bombers, and after the Bombers' performance last week, this isn't exactly a gimme for them.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for Kyle Langford, I don't know where the Bombers would be in the past few weeks. He arguably got them almost over the line against the Swans, and he just got them over the line against the Eagles. I mean, I think you have to tip the Bombers here, but even though North Melbourne looked a little bit better against Melbourne, I don't think they are. I mean, it's funny because obviously West Coast are one of the worst performing teams in the past 20 odd years, and they almost took North Melbourne's 7th spot. I mean, that would be embarrassing if North Melbourne finished bottom from here.
Yeah, it would be embarrassing, but I think Essendon do win. They will respond because they were just horrible against West Coast, and Langford just he did. It
surprises me that he's not being talked about a lot more as an All-Australian forward pocket, because I think that it's unfortunate because Toby Green and him are probably fighting out for that one spot. I don't know if they can have him and Langford in that All-Australian lineup. I just don't know if that would work. And I think they've got to fit a couple of the midfielders in those spots.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think it's going to be a bit difficult for fitting them both. But I think Kyle Langford's had a brilliant year nonetheless, and he definitely gets in the squad.
Yeah, he'll get in the 40,
Yeah. So after that, we get to Sydney versus the Gold Coast Suns at the SCG. This is kind of Sydney's bogey side.
Yeah.
They obviously beat them early in the season, but before that, they've had a really poor run against the Gold Coast. The Suns have actually been able to beat them quite regularly, really. And maybe that is because of Stuart Dew. Obviously, he's not there anymore. So I will be interested to see how this one goes for the Suns, if they're going to play out the rest of this season, because their final hopes are gone now with their loss to the Crows. I am going to pick Sydney. They are in very good form. I don't know if the Swans make it from finals from here, though, because I think it's just a little bit too far. I think those close losses that they had earlier in the season probably going to come back to haunt them. Yeah. And I think definitely that draw against the Cats is probably their biggest downfall for them. But I think they will win this one against the Gold Coast.
Yeah, I think the Swans do win. They're playing better footy at the moment, and
they've finally got all their players back.
Yeah, they've finally got their players back. They just look better at the moment. So, in the Gold Coast, if they can't do it in the midfield, they can't do it. So
yeah, I think that's fair enough. Cool. After that, we get to Brisbane versus the Crows at the Gabba. I think if this was in Adelaide, you give the Crows a huge chance here, but because it's at the Gabba, I think it's a pretty routine win for the Lions.
Yeah.
They need to start, bouncing back a little bit. The last few weeks have been pretty poor. And it's very interesting that the top four have performed quite poorly in the past month.
Yeah.
Not even the month, but the last 2 to 3 weeks. Port Adelaide have fallen off. Melbourne aren't playing that well. Brisbane have lost a couple of games. They've lost a few games there. They lost to the Gold Coast. They only just beat Fremantle. And then Collingwood have lost their last 2. I don't know if we've ever seen a top 4 in the past, 5-10 years that have just stopped performing.
Yeah,
and
they've struggled.
They've struggled. They're lucky they had a very good start to the season, because there's teams hunting them in the bottom 4. But I do think Brisbane will beat the Crows pretty convincingly here.
Yeah, I think the Brisbane, at the Gabba, they've always got it's the fortress there up in Brisbane, so they should win. And it's one of the 4 teams normally gets on a run.
Yeah.
When they get into the finals, I think last year Geelong went on an 15 game run and didn't win.
Well, you saw them and Sydney both had a great run towards the grand final, and they were the ones who got there. And you saw Melbourne, who had poor form, couldn't get there in the end. Yeah, they won that in straight sets. So you have to hit the finals at full pace, and I think Brisbane are a team that can do that.
Yeah.
So if they can get the home finals, I think they're going to be very hard to beat down at the Gabba. Although in saying that, when they've had home finals in the past few finals series, they haven't been able to produce on the main stage.
Yeah.
So they're going to have to somehow, when they make the finals, but I do think they will beat the Crows pretty convincingly there. After that, we get to probably the game of the round at the MCG, Carlton versus the Demons. Massive game for both teams. Carlton coming to this game red hot. Melbourne did come off a win against North Melbourne, but pretty sluggish performance, and obviously the massive loss of Harrison Petty, who I think if they finally found the forward that could bring them forward into the rest of this season, and then he gets injured.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I think this is going to be a tough game. I'm actually going to pick a bit of a roughie here. I'm going to be picking Carlton over the Demons. I just think they're in too good a form, the Blues, and who would have said that 7 or 8 weeks ago? This team bouncing back and potentially, I don't know if they'll make the 4. I think they're going to have to... they're 10 points off it, so they'd have to win every single game, and one of the teams would have to lose every single game. So it's pretty unlikely, but Carlton are doing everything they can right now to, give us their stakes towards a... I don't know about a premiership. I think it's a little bit too far for them. I don't know if they can win all 4 finals, but they're probably the best team in the comp at the moment, in form-wise.
Yeah, Yeah, Carlton fans, you're making finals, and you're going to win this week, I think. Just you seem to find the structure at the moment that you're coming, that you know how to play. You're playing under the Voss way.
Well, the thing is as well that they're finding, they beat St Kilda, but they didn't have Charlie Curnow dominating too well.
Exactly, he kicked one goal and it
was late in the last quarter
in the game.
too.
You don't have Mackay. You had Chera, Walsh out, so they're finding a way to do it. And if they can get some of those players back in the next couple of weeks, Carlton might be scary in the finals.
Yeah. I said in the review part that I think this could be the first time in a long time that I've actually thought the team outside of the top four could go all the way, because all the teams in the top four right now are not playing their best footy. And if you don't hit the finals with form, it's very hard to just start it up during the finals.
Yeah.
A lot of I don't know, since probably the Bulldogs, since any team has gone from the finals and hit and went into the going into the finals limping through and then being able to convert on the main stage. We've seen in 2017 Richmond hit the finals with a massive run. The Eagles did as well in 2018. In 2019 the Tigers did it again, and in 2020 they did as well. Actually, no, maybe not so much in 2020, so maybe that's the last time. But teams, if they hit the finals with pace, they can actually really go all the way.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that's going to be big, and I think Carlton are definitely probably the best form team in the comp at the moment. But after that, though, we get to West Coast versus Fremantle, probably one of the least broadcast derbies in a very long time. I don't think anyone really cares about this game anymore, to be honest. It's very poor how both the WA teams have done this year.
Yeah, it is. It's 100% it is.
I'm very surprised that West Coast have actually got some pretty good odds here. But, they have been pretty okay in the past few weeks, but I don't think it matters here. I think Freo win this one pretty convincingly, and they need to, really, just to save some face. If they lose to their crosstown rivals who have been pathetic for a majority of the season, I think that's a pretty poor performance. So surely they go in and win this one.
Yeah, Freo should win. I think they had their run, the West Coast Eagles, the last 2 weeks. They're going to... It just seems like that was their run and that's it.
Yeah, surely they peter out now, and I think the Freo get a pretty good win here. And it is interesting to see how Luke Jackson's playing as well. I think he's done very well in the past few weeks, and I think he is their ruckman going in the future. So we've already talked about that in a future trade video, but yeah, Sean Darcy, I don't know if he makes that squad, if he's in that team next year. He's such a good player, and I think he
deserves a number one ruck role.
Yeah. After that, we get to Sunday, down in Tassie. This is Hawthorn versus the Bulldogs. Bulldogs had a massive win last week against the Tigers, responding well, and Hawthorn, one of the biggest upsets of the season, going up against Collingwood and winning that. If this was at Marvel Stadium, I'd be picking the Bulldogs every day of the week, but because it's in Tassie, I am picking Hawthorn. I can see that you've tipped Hawthorn as well.
Yeah.
For us saying that we were picking some roughies this week, I think we've tipped them all the same anyway. But I just think Hawthorn... I did say this last week, that the Bulldogs were very much a response team.
Yeah, they were
a big response team, like Port Adelaide have been in the past as well. The Bulldogs are one of the biggest response teams in the AFL. They love to bounce back after being put against the wall. But once they are the foot on the throat comes off a little bit, they tend to lag behind.
Yeah.
And if they don't bring their best against Hawthorn down in Tassie, who are pretty good, they're very good down there. It's almost a fortress for them even this season. Yeah. They almost beat the Crows down there this season. So, as well as winning a couple of other games down there. So, I'm picking Hawthorn, and I think that the Bulldogs, this is the game they have to win. If they don't win this one, then they're right back in the race. If they win this one, then they'll make the finals, because they've got West Coast the week after.
Yeah, I think I've tipped Hawthorn, obviously, like you're saying. I've done it because of one huge reason. Bontempelli will get tagged, and McGuinness will go to him, and I just think if it's Liberatore and Bontempelli, I think if both of them don't fire... Western Bulldogs struggle.
Yeah.
They have struggled all season when both of them don't fire. So I think that's going to be a huge contest. And also Sicily's in career best form.
Yeah, he's been massive. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be massive. That I think he probably makes the All-Australian team from being in the team, making a defensive lineup from 16th position. But, he's done everything he can to make that spot.
Yeah. And
I don't think he misses it. And I think that when he plays in the team for Hawthorn, other than probably in round 1 against the Swans... When he played, all the games that he's been in this season, they've actually performed really well, the Hawks.
Yeah.
So, I think it'll be interesting how they go from here. James Sicily in career best form. I think the Hawks can win this one. But I will be interested to see if the Bulldogs do continue, because I think they have to. If they don't win this one, I don't think they win in round 24.
Yeah.
So they have to win this game. They should win it on paper, but down in Tassie, I think the Hawks have a real chance here to knock off a big team. After that, we get to Sunday afternoon, which is St Kilda versus Richmond. Massive game again. Tigers have really dropped off in their form the past few weeks, and the Saints have been free-falling for quite a while now, only beating Hawthorn, North Melbourne, and West Coast in the past 6 or 7 weeks. I think it's really hard to pick this one because both teams are really out of form.
Yeah.
The one thing is, I'm going to quickly change that because I didn't actually do that deliberately, so I did pick the right team. I had it on Richmond for some reason, but I realised I did tip the Saints. The only reason why I'm tipping the Saints here is because Richmond suck at Marble.
Yeah.
They can't win at Marble Stadium. And I think it's the last 9 or 10 times, ever since Dimmer Hardwick said that Richmond don't like playing there, they can't win a game there.
Yeah, they've lost...
I think 8 games. I think they lost 8 and 1 and got a draw.
Yeah, that's the record. So that experience is exactly the same reason I tipped the Saints.
Yeah.
And St Kilda do play well there. Like, even though they lost last week to Carlton, they still played well for most of the game.
Yeah, they're up until 3/4 time, and then
So-
they just stopped at the last quarter. I think they need to kick a winning score, though. They've got to stop. They've got to find a way to kick a winning score,
Yeah.
because I think that Richmond are a team that they can score against, because Richmond aren't the best down in defence. So I think that's where they can get them done. But the thing is, St Kilda haven't been able to really kick a good score since at least halfway through the season. So massive game for the Saints. They need to win this one to keep their finals hopes alive and stop the free falling out of the top 8. I do think they win this one, but I do think it will be a close one. And finally, we get to another big game at the end of the round: Port Adelaide versus GWS at Adelaide Oval. This is a massive game. Even though the Giants lost last week, they were pretty good against the Swans. But I think the Swans just were able to hold them off in the last quarter when the Giants were coming. So credit to the Swans in that one. But Port Adelaide, they lose this. This is 5 losses in a row. And I can't remember the last time when a top 4 team has lost 5 games in a row and still hold their top 4 spot.
Yeah, it's crazy how good Port were and now how bad they're actually going.
I mean, I know that they've got a lot of injuries, Port Adelaide, but
I don't like to make that excuse.
Yeah.
And it's coming into the talks with some of the past Port players in the media that's the reason for it. And yeah, it's just, I don't like it.
They've had a lot of injuries for a lot of the year, though. It hasn't been like just the last 4 weeks when they've lost.
Yeah.
It's because they're not bringing as much of the pressure that they need to bring to win games.
Yeah.
I think that obviously, I think Vizentini, who's one of the big calls that they were saying is like, they don't have a recognised ruckman. This guy was one of their best players on the weekend.
Yeah.
So I know that Lycett obviously wasn't there, and Sam Hayes wasn't playing either, which I don't know. Is he in
Bryn Teagle? So
are they in the Sandful, or are they just not playing? So
Teagle, I think was Lycett was injured. Teagle coming back from injury, and I don't know what Hayes is doing. I think he's still playing in the Sandful. So
yeah, well, I wouldn't be surprised if he leaves the season then. But yeah, I think that's massive for Port Adelaide. I have tipped the Giants because the Giants actually haven't... I mean, they obviously won against the Crows only, a month ago,
but they're
down at Adelaide Oval. And I just think they're playing better.
Yeah, they've played very well away this season, the Giants.
Yeah.
And that's why I've tipped them as well. I think that's one good reason that they played well away. Kingsley was pretty disappointed after that game against the Swans. And if Port don't get their defenders back, Toby Green's going to roam. Free.
I think Tom Jonas is a year too old now. I think that he would be a perfect match for him a few years ago, but now I think he's just too agile around the ground, Toby Green, and he'll run him ragged. And maybe what we've seen a lot this year is Toby Green maybe have a quiet first half, but if he's on someone like Tom Jonas for 2 quarters, I think he'll run him ragged and he'll be too tired to go with him in the second half.
Yeah.
So at this stage, Giants win this one. I think it will be a close one though, because the Giants don't win many big games.
Yeah.
And Port Adelaide, I think, can stay with them. And I think Port Adelaide on paper probably should win this one. They are up in the top 4. They're playing. They've been okay in the last few weeks, but they can't blame their injuries for this. They got to win this game.
Yeah, they can't go 5 losses in a row.
Yeah, they can't go 5 losses with where they are on the ladder. And this is coming from a Port fan over here too. So if he's saying it, I think Kane Cornes needs to, I understand being a little bit biased, and I think that it is a little bit funny when people are calling him biased when there's a lot of other commentators in the AFL and media people who are biased for their teams or their state as well.
Yeah.
But I don't think that they can blame injuries.
No.
They can, but I mean, I don't think they should be blaming injuries either. I think that Port Adelaide have got enough there to be winning games.
Yeah, exactly.
But now, guys, we get to the final segment of the podcast today, which is the AFL Fantasy. I had a pretty good week. I think I went up about a couple of thousand ranks. I think I'm in the top 4,000 now, which is pretty good. 2,468, which is pretty good for me. Bontempelli got the vice-captain, which I was very happy with, 151 to 302. My trades after this week, I got rid of Nick Dacos. Obviously, that was massive with his injury. He's going to be out for 6 weeks now. And he'll be out until finals time now. So I've got James Sicily in. I was a little bit concerned about it if I had to do it last week, because he does sometimes get out of games and he can score like a low 60, but his ceiling's so good. 160, 169. I think he scored one time this year as well. He just gets marks. They always go to him.
He marks and kicks it. That's what he does. He hardly handballs.
Yeah, so that's why I'm going with James Sicily. I think it's a pretty obvious one as well. Like, if you're going to go with any defender, he's the second best in the comp behind Jordan Dawson. So I think it's just an obvious choice in the end. And then I've also got rid of Harry Himmelberg. He's done pretty well since I got him in, but it's time to let him go. And the only reason why I got Dyson Heppel is because he's the only one I could really afford. I could have got... I think I was just out of range for... I think it was either Jack Sinclair or... Yeah, there's a couple of players around there where I could have got them, but they were just out of reach. And I could have changed James Sicily, but I think it's just the right option.
Yeah.
So I got Dyson Heppel. He's actually been pretty good since the bye. I don't think he's scored under 80 since.
Yeah, he's had a good run, Heppel.
He hasn't really been chosen by a lot of people, which is a little bit surprising. He's only been picked up by less than 1%. So, yeah, I think that'll be pretty good. Dyson Heppel, hopefully he continues the form that he's been in. Especially with Jordan Ridley out, I think they will use him a bit. They've been using him a bit more as well. My captains for this week will be Marcus Bontempelli at this stage. I may change that. I think he can beat Finn McGuinness. I think he's a different player than Nick Dacos.
I don't think he can.
He can go forward and kick goals though. Finn McGuinness isn't going to chuck it. He's going to go down there with him. So that's why I've left it at this stage. For my vice captain, and they obviously play versus Essendon, he's going to be Zach Merritt against North Melbourne.
Yeah. I
don't think anyone goes to Zach Merritt. I think he has a field day out there, and I don't think I will really have to matter about Bontempelli at this stage, but we will wait and see. I've also got a couple of other options in... I think Zach Butters and Rosie could have a pretty big game against the Giants because they don't tend to tag, and also Errol Goulden could be a chance as well, but... Thing is, I can't have him as a captain if I'm going to have Zach Merritt as a vice captain because it's not really
because they play at the same time.
Yeah. They play at the same time, so it's not really worth it. But that's my AFL fantasy for this week. What do you got with your trades and stuff?
It's been a shit couple of weeks in AFL fantasy. I've kind of stuffed up my captains the last couple of weeks, but I did have my vice on Bontempelli last week, so that did help a lot. But the players like Dacos being tagged, still had a horrible game. And I brought in Josh Kelly last week, which I probably shouldn't have done with Tom Green coming in, but that bit me in the ass. So I've slid out of the top 5,000, which I'm really disappointed at because I'm keep on getting over 2,200 every week, so it's really disappointing. But so my trades this week, I've went with Marek. I got rid of him, and I got that Ball Ace for the Crows, who got 90, which was pretty good.
You didn't even know that until I told you.
I didn't watch many of the games, so and I got rid of Nick Dacos, and I got Zach Merritt because they're playing North Melbourne this week, so he should do all right. When he played West Coast last week, and he got 128, so
you'd think he'd keep on going.
Yeah, you'd think he'd go again.
He's been in very good form as well, Zach Merritt.
Yeah, so I've went the same as you for vice captain. I've went Zach Merritt. I think he should be able to play well against North Melbourne, and I did go with Tim English for captain this week against Hawthorn. I think he should be able to dominate in the ruck.
Yeah.
I just don't...
Ned Reeves. Is it Ned Reeves?
I think it is. It's either him or...
It's not really a known ruckman.
The right combination that Hawthorn have. You think he should be able to run around the ground as well.
Well, I'm saying that Hawthorn's midfield's been one of the better performing ones this year, so it will be interesting how he goes with that Tim English.
So, that's my fantasy.
Hopefully you can bounce back.
I'd like to bounce back because I lost this week, so I've got to play my semi-final match, which is annoying. But
well, I've got in our own league, I've got the bye because I won. just by 40 points.
Yeah.
I think it was. Yeah, 39 points. So
Yeah.
I was happy. If I didn't pick Bontempelli's my advice, I would have lost. So that was good for me. Anyway, guys, that is the Boundary Riders podcast for today. Round 22 coming up very soon. Hopefully your team bounces back this week. And yeah, thanks for watching. Won't be long now as well. We will be doing a live poll countdown of the votes, probably the week of the bye as well. We'll be doing all the countdown of the votes. And looking at it right now, there's at least 4 players or 5 players that could win it from here now with Nick Dacos out.
Yeah, Nick Dacos is the big out now.
But to be fair, he wasn't leading by much, and he had a pretty poor couple of weeks.
Yeah, so
we won't say if he's leading or not at the moment, but if he was, I don't know if he'll hold it for very long. So with 3 rounds to go, guys, massive couple more weeks. Hopefully your team wins this week, and that's all from us. So we will catch you all next time.
See you later, guys.